Hey guys, I'm going to be presenting about the 1967 Black Panther protest against gun control. And in my paper, I titled this protest a microcosm for the fight for Black liberation and revolution. So just for some background context, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was founded in 1966 by Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Huey P. Newton is on the right and Bobby Seale is on the left in the picture I attached. This protest that I'm going to be talking about today occurred in Oakland, California, and the Black Panther Party was actually founded in California before it was nationalized later on. And the Black Panther Party originally and continues to attract the Black working class and kind of appeals to their lack of power in a capitalist, predominantly white society. And they support revolution, cultural autonomy, economic advancements of the working class and other POC communities. And so because of these more radical ideas, they also preached ideologies of more communist revolutionaries such as Malcolm X, Chairman Mao, etc. And they also practiced mutual aid, whether that be in the form of food giveaways, free health clinics, free breakfast or food programs in Black neighborhoods and communities or other things. So that's the Black Panther Party and how it was founded in '66. And this 10-point program also laid at the foundation of not only the Black Panther Party as a whole, but also every protest that they engaged in, regardless of the subject matter of the protest. And so you can read all 10 points here. It is fairly lengthy, but just to summarize, this 10-point program was calling for just freedom, autonomy, and most of all, an end to the unjust treatment and violence against the Black community that they have faced for so many years, especially in the United States. So the actual protest happened on May 2nd, 1967 in Oakland, California, and it was in direct response to the pending Mulford Act. Mulford was an assemblyman in California who decided to write this act that would prevent people from carrying firearms in public. As I mentioned before, the Black Panther Party was created to in response to a lot of the violence against the Black community. And so the Black Panthers and other Black community members had found that arming themselves and their community helped to keep themselves safe. So obviously they were very opposed to this pending Mulford Act, as it would strip them of their right to carry firearms in public. And so when this bill was being heard, 30 Black Panthers entered the assembly hall carrying loaded guns, a variety of firearms, whatever they possessed, which was legal because the act had not been passed yet. And they were very careful about adhering to California's penal code regarding firearm carry in public. So everything they were doing was completely legal, despite, like, looking at these pictures, it might seem like they were doing something super egregious or illegal, but this in fact was completely fine to be carrying a firearm in public like this during the time. So they did enter the Capitol, 30 of them, and once inside, Bobby Seale, like I mentioned before, one of their leaders, gave a statement on behalf of the group. So he did reference the 10-point plan in the statement, like I had just mentioned. But overall, his main point was that keeping Black people disarmed is a tactical move to keep Black people physically powerless, as they have already been kept politically, economically, and socially powerless for years. So he's kind of zooming out on this more acute issue of gun control to look at this larger paradigm of racial oppression and how it's impacting the Black community as a whole. So these are just some pictures of some of the Black Panther members in the Capitol and outside the Capitol holding guns, and an example of a news article published shortly after. So they were promptly asked to leave after Seale had given the statement, which they complied. There was no violence. They just entered, gave the statement, and kind of left as the police escorted them out. But after the Black Panthers that were present decided to gather outside of a nearby gas station, just to reconvene, and police ended up disrupting this gathering by storming the group with riot guns, loaded pistols, patrol wagons, and a variety of other riot gear. Just to keep in mind, it was only 30 of them that gathered, so it wasn't like it was a huge group. And once again, this was another example of a small, peaceful, and completely legal gathering, just following the demonstration in the Capitol. So as a result of this, 25 of the 30 Black Panthers present were arrested and had their firearms taken from them, and were arrested for disturbing the peace and a variety of other misdemeanors or felonies. So that's some background and what actually occurred at the protest. And so the three goals I identified of the protest were: one, to shed light on the brutality against the Black community; two, to keep the Black community and other POC communities alike with the right to bear arms in order to protect themselves; and three, to demonstrate how oppression is interconnected and to motivate more people to fight for the Black Panther cause. So I said that goal one was accomplished largely through the 10-point plan that was referenced explicitly during Seal's speech. And this allowed not only the present Black Panther members to become just reminded or more aware of what they were fighting for, but it also helped many of the assemblymen, who are largely white and of upper class status, to learn, whether they wanted to or not, about a lot of information about the physical, political, and economic violence that the Black community has had to undergo. And outside of the ACUE protest itself, there was also a lot of inter-community communication and documentation of the violence witnessed against Black people to ensure that everyone was kept aware of what was going on, so they could unfortunately remain vigilant in order to keep themselves safe. So there was a lot of light was definitely shed on brutality against the Black community for people that were unaware and people that were already aware and just needed to learn more. So I said that the second goal was accomplished in a pretty straightforward manner. They wanted to keep specifically the Black community with the right to bear arms in order to protect themselves. So they did this during the protest by bringing firearms into the Capitol legally to prove that armed Black people are not a threat, and they're simply exercising a right that has saved oppressed people throughout history. However, unfortunately, the good guy with a gun narrative seems to only apply to white people, as we'll see with how this goal actually turned out in my next slide. And I said the third goal was accomplished in a few different ways. So first, there was a lot of ideological education of not only the Black Panthers members specifically, but also of the Black community at large, to teach about the correlation between all systems of oppression. So like economic oppression and environmental racism, for example, are more interconnected than one might think. So to teach kind of ideologies that support that, and just like data or personal experiences behind that, to kind of just keep the Black community educated and aware of the extent of the injustices that they were facing, and to bring people together and make it less divisive. And also, like I mentioned before, the 10-point plan was recited during the protest, and Bobby Seale, who recited this, was very well versed in political theory and familiar, obviously, with the sufferings of his people, because he was a strong proponent for the Black Panther cause. So having a really well-versed leader with lived experience and the ideological background and education to like further the Black Panthers initiatives was really important in the education of people and motivating more people to fight for the cause. And then I also referenced an interview, a 1989 interview with the other founder of the Black Panther organization, Huey P. Newton, in response to the 1967 protest. And despite it being about gun control, he also mentioned, and you can read this quote here, that we, as in the Black community, need education, decent housing, fair treatments in court, medical care, availability for food and clothing, full employment, etc. And that this is a part of a larger blueprint for community development and the needs and aspirations of Black people. So while this was just about gun control on the May 2nd, 1967 protest, there was a larger, there were larger ideals that were and goals to be pushed. And then finally, whether I think these goals were accomplished or not. So first, I think this protest did a really great job of shedding light on brutality against the Black community, because coverage of the protest, was sustained for far longer than 48 hours. In fact, for weeks, even months following the protest, the Black Panthers demonstration was front page news. Not, it wasn't just mentioned a few times here and there. It was really evocative news, because the pictures of them holding guns in the Capitol and the message they were fighting for was, it was evocative, like I said, but also not a lot of people agreed with it. So it was really covered for quite some time. And I just gave an example on May 21st, 67, which is almost 3 weeks following the protest. The New York Times published an article titled "A Gun is Power, Black Panther Says." So even 3 weeks almost after, they were still interviewing Black Panther members and interviewing people that were present to get a take on what the protest was about and why it occurred and stuff like that. So it definitely gave the, it definitely allowed for Black Panther members to speak on why they were protesting in a more public setting, and to also kind of explain, whether it did a good job of this is another story, but to explain the importance of keeping the Black community armed, and kind of the history of and the present day reality of violence against them. And so for this second goal, I said that it was not fulfilled because the Mulford Act was pretty swiftly passed following the protest. It was passed on July 22nd, 1967 in a 29-7 vote, which is almost like 2 months after the initial protest, but that's pretty quick in terms of getting a bill passed. And so Mulford did make a comment following the protest that he viewed it as a threat to him and the safety of people, et cetera, et cetera. So he was really obviously upset about what had transpired in the Capitol, and that just, I think, gave him more reason to try and get this bill passed as soon as possible. So I think that represents a failure in this respect of the protest, because what they were acutely fighting for was so quickly flipped. They didn't get the outcome that they wanted. And then this last goal, I think, was definitely accomplished as well, because the growth of the Black Panther Party actually really surged following this 1967 protest. And I referenced some data that showed how the Black Panther Party not only grew in size and influence, but it opened branches in major cities, gained presence on college campuses, and ultimately gained as many as 5,000 members across 49 local chapters by 1969. So if you remember, this protest happened in 67, just 2 years before, and the only chapter was in Oakland, California at the time, because it had just started in 1966. So it quickly blossomed into 49 chapters following this protest. And this also allowed just for more action towards the cause, but it also allowed for more people to be educated on the oppression and the injustices the Black community had faced, as well as specifically how the Mulford Act fit into this paradigm of racial oppression, whether they were in support of gun control or not. So I think that goal is also achieved. And that is that. I have, these are just some sources for images and then the references from my paper. But yeah, that is the 1967 Black Panther protest against gun control.